It seems fitting as the North American Counter-Strike streamer. Let's start with EG and Liquid first, and I think obviously EG is way more spicier to talk about. There's a lot more going on. On paper, I think EG made a lot of great moves. I think if you look at where that team's trajectory has went, where a lot of the problems were, right? I mean, let's not beat around the bush. That team looked fucking sad, run down, and nobody wanted to be there anymore. Doesn't matter whose fucking fault it was. Like, people say Stan, right? Like, he's a pretty obvious choice. He was the IGL of the team. He definitely doesn't usually look pretty happy on the player cams, but at the end of the day, like, you don't really know. And I think a catastrophic meltdown in that capacity, literally everybody is to blame. And that isn't like some coward answer. That is like the fucking truth. When that whole team, like, when you go from the high of EG, where they actually look like the best team in North America, to you don't even remember that anymore because of what happened and how fucking hard they just literally just ate shit, right? You're looking at a much better roster now. Now, that being said, there are the whole roster, every single member is a question mark. They are not a known quantity. The last person to get signed is the most known quantity on the roster, right? In my opinion. Like, Rush is, you know what you're getting, you know what level you're getting out of him, you know what he's going to provide to the team, and you know what his role will be, right? Like, 100% fucking concrete, you know what to expect. The whole roster minus Rush, in my opinion, is kind of like a, well, on paper, this is good, right? Stu, great IGL, literally one of the best callers in North America, but he has a problem, right? He does, and I love Stu to death. Stu's emotions get the best of him, whether it's team related, individual performance related. Stu has a hard time sometimes not being his own fucking worst enemy and getting the fuck in his way, right? And he gets frustrated, and I think, me being, you know, outside looking in, I think sometimes that affects his calling, and that's where Stu struggles as a caller. That's why he's the perfect secondary IGL. Is he doesn't have to be like that steady emotional rock of the team, like a Nitro, right? But when you're secondary, you don't have to be that, but you can still have incredible input at the right times. And regardless, Stu is probably, you've heard so many people talk about Stu and his intellect for the game. He is one of the smartest players to play Counter-Strike, especially in the North American scene. So him as the IGL, that's a big plus, right? It's just like, can Stu get back to his individual form a little bit? It started declining in Liquid, but the whole team started declining, similar to EG. So it's like, okay, you know, I think it's more so an individual motivation thing. Not that he wasn't working hard, but at the end of the day, like, a new project is going to give him a breath of fresh air. I think that's going to really help out Stu. It's just going to be, can that individual level, can he get reinvigorated again? I think that's where the next piece comes in. I think Tim will be a huge role in this. That's why if Tim, right, can be himself, like literally just be himself, hybrid, not full-time op, right, which with Cirque on the roster, I don't think he will. I think it's a great duo to have. You know, they're great friends. Tim is a steady rock. He's not some big emotional swing type of guy. Neither is Rush, right? I think Breeze and Cirque are a little bit more quiet, and I think Tim will be a lot more vocal, and so will Rush, and they are steady, consistent rocks next to Stu. So that's like a big positive for all of this. But what it will ultimately come down to is Stu's calling balanced with Tim and Rush's secondary voices being able to keep the team like in a forward pushing way in the middle of matches. But then the biggest problem for the whole roster is individually they have not looked good, right? Like, you can say AG's form plummeted as a unit, and it absolutely did. And that's the positive. The positive is individually they all look really rough, but we kind of all know why, right? Like, just the situations, nobody was happy in the situations that they were in, and this is a fresh start. And it's not like you're asking players that weren't top 20 players literally in the fucking world to just be those top 20 players again. You're not asking them to be something they're not. You're just saying, hey, can you get to this level that you're at before? I think EG has so much potential for the NAC and so much potential as a roster, but there's a lot of things that got to go right. And that's the pitfall of the roster, is just like, there's a lot of pieces that all have to come together in a very short period of time. And that's gonna be hard, you know, where it's different for Liquid, and we'll go into Liquid now, right? Liquid is not having 3 new players come into the team, right? You already have the core, like, well, actually, I say you're not having these players come into the team, but I'm absolutely wrong. You actually are having 3 players come into the team, but it doesn't feel that way. Let me put it that way. So Shocks, right? Like, I've talked about it a lot on stream. If you've been in the streams when I've discussed it, Shocks, I'm not a fan of the move. And it's not because I think a lot of people throw shade at Shocks' individual form. That's not why I'm not a fan of the move. I think Shocks actually, in terms of where he's at in his career and what he provides to a team, is a great fit. But I do not like when teams try to do the EU NA thing. It just feels like a temporary move. It feels like a lateral move for Liquid to just like, they don't have like a better idea or a better option. And I'm not saying there's necessarily somebody else they should have gotten, or I'm in NA. I don't really, it's tough for Liquid because they want to win now, right? They don't want to do the Grim thing. They don't want to build a player up. You know, people like expect them to, and they shouldn't actually. Like, Liquid has literally Naf and Elige right now, right? Like, you don't want to waste these players. Like, it's not to say that they're going to be bad in the next year or two, but you want to be winning now. You don't want to be spending this time having to bring in a new player and build them up. So on one hand, I think the Shocks move is kind of like it's a time saver. Like, just gives them time to figure out what they want in the next year or two. And it doesn't feel like a long-term solution for the roster or like a long-term fit. That being said, he's a clutcher. He's a good presence within the team. And that is something that Liquid drastically has been missing. They need a closer, man. They need somebody that when they're in that 1v1, 9 times out of 10, they're taking it home. We just know, like, when games get tough, when rounds get close, they need that guy that can close. And Shocks can still absolutely do that. Nitro, we already know why he's back. He's gonna IGL, and he's not gonna AWP. And people forget this about Nitro, okay? Nitro was not an IGL. He wasn't an AWPer. This dude was a star fucking rifler, and he's really good. And I know people might forget, or like, I'm not saying he will be a star rifler now, but it actually makes me really happy that Nitro isn't going to be burdened with the AWP role anymore, because I think he's a much better player overall without having to always have the AWP in his hands. He's a player that you can see, right? You can see it when he does AWP for Liquid. He can lock down areas. He's very comfortable with it, but he's not a player that you want in that role all the time. It's a very different thing, like picking up the AWP versus being the AWPer. It's a totally different game. And so I'm really glad that they have OC, right, to basically facilitate that. So you have your emotional IGL steady rock, and you brought in another good emotional factor in the team with Shocks. I think from those sides, those are really positive. When you start looking at the OC move, this is where things get really interesting. When was the last time Liquid had a full-time AWPer on their roster? Like, that was like actually an AWPer. Like, man, the JDM? I can't even, was it Kusta technically, or then was it like Simple? Dude, it's been a long time. I can't even remember who it was. All right. And that has me excited because Liquid, bro, they get bodied by other AWPers. And AWPers don't necessarily go at other AWPers, but when you have an AWPer that is making impact on the server, Fallen? No. Fallen doesn't count, chat. Okay, here's what you got to understand. Fallen does not count. He was the IGL of the team, okay? Like, you guys are going to sit here and be like, Fallen, LOL, Flom doesn't even consider Fallen. Fallen is the IGL of the motherfucking team, okay? I don't like it. I used to. When Fallen used to do it, it's like sick, but it's just not the move anymore. Like, I'm trying to think of like who does it where like Fallen is the most successful person at doing it. Dude has fucking 2 majors under his belt, but I'm talking about somebody that comes into the team and their only role is to fucking op, right? Like, that is what I'm talking about, and I should have been more specific with that. Like, but still, long story short, Liquid, for the first time in a long fucking time, have not had that AWPer, like where he just comes in and he's just meant to op. OC, I know this isn't meant to like say he's better, because that would be fucking ignorant, but to put it in perspective, like how well OC has done leading up to this point, he was like, I think for a while, like higher rated than Simple. Now he's bullying tier 2 NA Counter-Strike, right? He is. These are inflated stats. They will not be these stats, but it's extremely fucking promising, and it's really interesting, and it should be really cool. Now, the next roster I want to talk about, oh man, Vitality. I feel like this move still like doesn't sink in with people. Maybe it's just like a me thing, or maybe it's how like the Astralis roster kind of slowly kind of like dissolved and changed. But this has gotta be, this Vitality roster has to be like the biggest move, right? Like in history in CS, right? Like I feel like it has to be. 2 4-time major winners and the major winning coach that many would regard as like the best coach in Counter-Strike. Device to nip? No, that's not as, no. One player to a roster that hasn't even brought still a second star player to that roster to grow with him. I wouldn't say nip. Like, no, I don't know what would be better or bigger. That's true. The FaZe, that's a good one. Good. Thank you. See, I knew there was got to be something. I was like, man, there's something, right? Like, no, FaZe assembling was fucking monumental. I think in terms of name and star power, which is weird considering 114 I think the FaZe one probably is still bigger. There's so much that could absolutely go wrong, you know, with this roster. But man, if they do pull it off, like this is a roster where, dude, imagine everything actually just like works the way that it should on paper. That'd be like, dude, Zywoo op with Magister Pre back in form, Zonic coach. Oh, dude, like Apex has been calling great, man. Like Masuda's been coming into his own. This roster, it's like it seems unlikely because international rosters are so much harder to do. What if it does like work out on like the way that it should, the way that it's designed to work? You're not just dealing with language, right? Like you're not, it's not even it. First off, like language is the most important thing. Like them all coming in English, you know, if you heard interviews and all that stuff, like English is fine, but like being in high pressure environments in English will be difficult. And then the next step is like even cultures, you know, like, bro, you know, I meme about it all the time, but imagine Apex having the mental breakdown that he does, but Zonic standing above him, right? Just like shoulder, arms crossed, just like, just looking down, you know, there's a lot that'll just be like really, it's just gonna be like weird, odd, funny to see, but also really exciting. It goes back to how comfortable Zywoo speaks English. No, Zywoo speaks English perfectly, guys. Like actually, if you guys haven't seen any recent interviews with him, he recently sat down with, who the fuck was it? Somebody. I literally watched like a full-on interview with him recently on stream, but I don't remember what we watched. I feel like he could come to the US and operate just fine, right? Like, yeah, with Sadakis, yeah. He wouldn't have any issue. He had no problem with comprehension. He didn't stutter. Like, in terms of understanding, like, he sometimes had a hard time finding one word, but that's the same for the Danes, right? Like, that's the same for everybody. I think the language barrier is a problem, but it's not a matter of speaking English. It's the next step. It's being in, like I said, a high pressure environment where you have to immediately come up with the thing to say in English, not your native language. And that's what's interesting and what will be interesting. And the hardest part for that team, I think playstyle wise, I think Zywoo plays very similarly to like how Zonic has structured teams before. I don't think this is like some weird clash in styles. I do think Apex does call some things like that are maybe considered like unorthodox, or like, you know, he just kind of calls like some explosive shit sometimes, right? Like he's an emotional guy and like it shows sometimes in his calling, and that's what's good and bad about him. But I think it's like culture, language, and those are the big things. Next up is G2. And I'm gonna say his name wrong a million times, but I think it's Manesi. That's how Ocelot said it.
Money S.
I think Money S is right.
Well, I'll be able to hear from the casters like how I'm supposed to say it. But you have Alexi B, Manesi, and the new coach from Vitality, Xtaz, I think is how you say it. I have more confidence in Manesi's ability to perform than I previously did after, and this is kind of like shit, like this isn't really that strong of logic. Let me just start with that, okay? But it's hard not to feel this way when you see it when I was co-streaming. It's hard not to like get this feeling. I feel like which is when I watch FaZe play for NIP, who's been playing in the We Play Academy League where Manessi's been playing. He looked great, man. He slotted in beautifully. He looked prepared to play the game. He didn't seem surprised by like the pace of the game. He wasn't like, he didn't look lost, man. He came right in and he looked prepared, ready to play, and was not put in any uncomfortable scenario. Was that NIP as an org preparing him really well? Maybe the opponents he was playing weren't doing a good job of making him uncomfortable, but he was playing like Nuke, and that's a really difficult map to move around on quickly and like always have good reads, and he did. So like I said, this isn't that strong of logic, but I'm just taking the idea that the We Play Academy League is actually preparing these guys for the next level like quite well. And if Manessi is doing what he was doing at that level and he can slot into G2, I mean, there's high hopes for G2 fans here. And you know, kind of similar to Liquid, G2 has just been doing this thing where they're like, who's opping? Like, Nico's gonna op. And then you know, I'm just gonna say it, I told you so. Like, Nico can op, like, don't get me wrong, but there is a fundamental difference, just like the IGL op thing versus like an op. There's a difference between a player that can pick up an op and a player that ops. You know, when Nico now has to play car on Dust 2, everybody knows where you are and everybody understands where you have to be and how much utility. Like, it's just a very different game. And when they benched Kenny S and they kept with Omenek and they kept Jax, like Omenek, you know, people make fun of him as an opper, which is hilarious. He's not an opper, first off. Like, Omenek is just the jack of all trades, and he did what his team needed him to do to try to win and be competitive, and he fucking did a great job, to be honest, considering the circumstances. And I think like G2 now getting that op role back is going to help them a lot, because without that op role, Nico he's doing it, which is insane, but he is doing too much for that team and they rely too much on him to do that too much. That's the problem, right? Like, Nico was going for something like over half the team's actual duels, and he was winning them the majority of the time. It was an unreal stat. He had the highest impact rating in the major. It was disgusting. The dude and he did it with a rifle. Now, I'm just saying, like, having that op presence back in your team for Nico, hopefully is going to open up Nico a little bit more. I don't think his stats are necessarily going to go up because he's on the team, but just in general, it's going to feel less like Nico go kill and they have other options. And that's really important for you to be consistent and to be like competing for championships. Is you need a different you need a different threat. You need, right? Like, it's not just simple anymore, right? It's simple, it's bit, it's electronic, it's fucking scary. All right, it's scary out there if you got to play Navi, because anybody can hit you. And there was too much support around Nico, but it was never really designed that way, to be honest. And people love to meme that, like, the Nico effect and all that, but like, it just kind of like dissolved into that, right? And it was the only way they were able to win. Now Manessi's there. I have high hopes. I don't think he's going to take over, and like, expecting him to dominate, I think, would be unfair. I hope he does. If he does, that'll be sick. But my expectations is that like he'll do well, and him doing well will be enough to get G2 in a new area where Nico isn't like so heavily relied on. And then the next piece of that puzzle is Alexi B. Like, I think where G2 hits the sweet spot and where G2 is going to become this force to be reckoned with is if Alexi B can get all the pieces working together, micromanaging him the way that he does, because he does a phenomenal job of it, but knowing to like let Nico, right, like take the reins off of Nico. He might cause problems at times by being maybe not with the team or not completely with the cohesive unit, but Nico is too smart individually as a player and too fucking good to be like kind of waiting for Alexi B to tell him what to do. But the downside is Manessi doesn't basically follow through, right, chat? He's not as powerful, and then Alexi B and Nico butt heads, and then the team just fucking death spirals. I feel like that could happen. I don't think it really will, but that is something that like should be considered, you know? Oh yeah, Robs. I don't have too many opinions about the FaZe thing. Cop out answer, boys. I kind of just want to see FaZe play. There's going to be a lot of pressure on Rain and Kerrigan to do all the dirty work for the team. That's a lot of star power. Brokey, you know, made top 20. He is a star opper. Like, he is getting there. His T side needs work, and he needs to find a way to like make more impact and find more space on T side. But Brokey's a fucking star in his own right. He, especially during the online era, he carried the fuck out of FaZe. Twist, obviously a fucking star, exceptional fucking player. And then you're adding another star player, right? You're adding another star player with Robs. You got a lot of you got a lot of people that need a lot of space, a lot of things that they need to be the best players they can be. It's not that it can't be done. It's just really comes down to, can Kerrigan and Rain kind of like create the space for those players? Can they anchor certain positions so the other players can move? Like, it's a clear firepower upgrade on paper. It's just, you know, when you have this much firepower and you have players that I think kind of sometimes fall into similar play styles, it puts pressure on the other players on the roster to do a lot more. And Complexity, to wrap it up, I really like the roster. I think Junior has to find a level of consistency that he's been lacking. I would put that in the fact that I also feel like he needs to settle into a team. Complexity, for me, my personal goal for that roster, I just wanted to see that roster compete, make playoffs sometimes, stay in top 20 the whole year. Then, like, let's see how the players develop. Let's see who's got it, who doesn't on that roster. After 1 year, this whole year, like, one roster move. If it makes sense, maybe two. That's it. Like, just let those guys get experience. Let them see what they're capable of. Let's just see where that roster goes. I think that roster can hold top 20. Them being top 10 is a really, really, really lofty stretch that I hope the org doesn't have on them, and I hope, like, they can have that goal. Like, they can. But I think, like, top 20 is a very realistic, like, that's where they want to be. That's where they should be going the whole time. Like, top 20, top 20, top 20. That sums it up. That sums it up. I hopefully, did you guys enjoy it, chat? I was fucking zooming on that conversation. Woo.